Hello. I hope that you can hear me out there. I'm not really sure if this is working yet or not. Is this going? Am I on? I never know how this is. Oh yeah, okay. You guys can see me and hear me. Excellent. All right. So we're going to give it a few minutes here, but just in case, for those of you who are already here, if you were expecting to see Jon Del Arroz, sadly, he has canceled at the very last minute. But I am still going to do a show. It's just not really going to be the RPG Pundit encounter, because that has to be, you know, that's an interview show. And sadly, we couldn't get anyone on short notice here. But I am going to be talking about some hot topics of the RPG scene for this last week, just a couple. And I will be answering your questions. So this is your opportunities to interview me if you like. And we'll see what we come up with. It probably won't be as long as a typical RPG Pundit encounter issue, but episode, but well, we will see how it goes after that. I'm just going to give it a bit of time, you know, as usual, for people to come in. I don't have any fancy like intro video like Diversity and Dragons or some other people do. So I'm just going to ramble on a little bit for the first while. Oh, well, Sly Glitch has a question there. He says, how long have you been an author? I don't know if I don't really use the term author, because author sounds like someone who writes a novel, and I've never written a novel. But I've been writing books since the early 2000s, and I've been writing RPGs since about what would it be, 2007, something like that. Domino is the guest, says some people. Well, Domino is actually just right off camera over here. She was sitting on my lap a moment ago, and then I slightly shifted my leg and she dived off as if I was about to attack her or something. And now she's sitting on top of my router and licking herself. But I'm hoping you guys will be able to get a glimpse of her at some moment here, if she comes back this way. And as you can see from the scarf and whatnot, it's gotten colder already here. It's autumn now, and Domino has taken to spending more time on my lap than she was when it was, you know, hot in the summer. So and she's getting so big. She's just crazy big. So she's eager to try to get outside too. She's always trying to escape, to run out the door when I opened it. But you know, she's the thing is that she hasn't had all of her vaccinations yet, right? And especially there's one important one that's for feline leukemia, that you don't want a little kitten to be going outside and interacting with other cats. And there are other cats in the kind of courtyard of my house block, because you know, that's a really terrible disease. Now, once she gets vaccinated for that, but you have to wait until she's a certain age. Once she gets the vaccination, then it's okay, pretty much. And then I will train her to stay within a certain area. But right now, she's stuck inside at all times, and she's really pissed about that. She's training her huntress skills on toys. That's for sure. All right, how many people have we got in here? Where does it show me how many people I've got in here? I don't even know this. All right, we got 29 watching now. Well, that's not too bad, considering that this technically has been like, it's a canceled episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter. For those of you who have just been arriving, sadly, the RPG Pundit Encounter is not to be this time. It was going to be with noted and controversial sci-fi and fantasy author Jon Del Arroz, but sadly, he at the last minute he got sick, and so he was unable to attend. And I don't know if you guys know, but I've been trying to get Jon Del Arroz for a long time. I mean, this was going to be episode 8. We have one episode every 4 weeks of the RPG Pundit Encounter, and I was trying to get him to be on episode 2. That's how early on this was, and at each point it's been impossible. And finally, he committed to it. I like got to him like weeks in advance, and he said, "Yeah, for sure, let's do it." Great, okay, great. And then we get to here, and on the same day, he's like literally in bed, according to him, with some disease, and that's that. Well, we'll try again in another 8 weeks and see if see how that goes. Because the 4 weeks from now, I've already got another guest, so we'll try and see if we can get Jon Del Arroz at some point, because I know that conversation is going to be interesting, because there's going to be a lot of stuff. We're both, I would say, I'm the final boss of internet shitlords, but so is he. He's a fellow shitlord, a guy that never shies from controversy, and obviously there'd be a lot of stuff we'd agree with and a lot of stuff we wouldn't agree with, and it's going to happen. I'm sure we're going to make it happen at some point. But it's a shame, because like I said, there's only room in my schedule to do this once every 4 weeks. So that means we've missed an episode. Episode 8 will be in 4 weeks from now. But I'm on here now, and we've got a good number of people here. Before I start with the topics of the day, I will mention a few things. This live stream isn't being monetized as we're recording, but I will be very grateful to anyone who wants to give a super chat, like Sadwings Raging just did. Thank you very much. That's $10. Keep plugging away, RPG Pundit. I'm not sure if that W was on purpose or not, but I guess it could be. And thank you, Sadwings. The money that you guys give me for the super chats will be going right into the Domino Toy Fund. Like I said, my other cats, excuse me, I'm trying to get some here. Okay, my other cats never got very into toys. They didn't like playing with toys. They liked like sitting in boxes and goofing around, but they never got too much into store-bought toys. But from a previous bunch of super chats, I've been getting her some pretty steady toys, mostly of the like weird creature on a string variety. Oh, look what's going to happen here. Look, can you see down there, guys? There she is. She went right for the toy. Come on, where are you, Domino? There she is. There's Domino. Ah, she's diving down. All right, so these sort of toys, she freaking loves them. She also destroys them, which my other cats never did. But she's going to be a vicious huntress when she's older. Boone, I'm going to talk about tariffs in a little bit here. Yeah, so guys, if you want to give super chats, those super chats will, for those of you that might be showing up for the first time to one of my live streams, I'm not one of these guys who will only read comments from the audience if they do a super chat. I will read any comments that I find worth talking about or interesting or relevant, right? But obviously, if you do a super chat, I'll be kind of obliged to read what you wrote, unless it's going to get me like banned from YouTube or something. So yeah, now she's like playing around under my feet here. So second, before we start, just as we're waiting to see if there's some last minute stragglers arriving here. Hi, it's Greg Gillespie. Hey, how's it going? So again, Jon Del Arroz wasn't able to make it. Instead, this is going to be a solo live stream, like many I've done before. I'm going to be talking about some important topics that have come up over this week, and you guys will have the opportunity to ask me questions and to bring subjects into the area of discussion. I want to do some plugs first. So 101 Sarmatians, the source book for Baptism of Fire. If you don't have Baptism of Fire yet, well, you should totally get it and then get 101 Sarmatians. This is a great collection of NPCs, plots, and deeper setting details in the Baptism of Fire setting that are all really useful. And it's already a bestseller, so you should check that out. Second, the Old School Companion 3. Unfortunately, I can't show it yet because I haven't gotten the books yet, because the books have to arrive from North America. But the Old School Companion 3 is out. It is also a bestseller. It's selling like hotcakes, just like the Old School Companions 1 and 2 did. It is a great resource. It is full of all kinds of supplementary material that you can use for Baptism of Fire or Lion and Dragon, but also for any OSR game. There's multiple systems of magic that are not Vancium, but that you can just kind of add on, right? Like they're like ritual magic, right? That you can put into the game. There's a whole bunch of new medieval authentic monsters. There are guides to culture, stuff about, again, like stuff about the English aristocracy there. There's stuff about weird details that you might find in villages that are all based on either real details in villages or real like folk legends about villages. There's a chapter, my favorite chapter of all, which is Medieval College Adventures. Life at a medieval college like Oxford or Cambridge in the 1400s was insane, right? It's like you couldn't believe it. Neither Harry Potter nor Strixhaven is anywhere near as demented as what it was like to be a young scholar in Oxford or Cambridge around 1453. And I give you all the details and tables and events and things that you can use to run a campaign of basically like medieval Animal House. Okay, it is nuts. And so that's great. And then you have the Cult of the Saints, which shows you if you're running a game that is set in like either in a Christian setting or in a setting that might not be Christian, but that would have like saint characters as opposed to just deities. There's a set of mechanics and guidelines for how the veneration of saints can be used to gain the intercession of saints. And then there are like 3 complete medieval cities that have been detailed as of the 15th century versions of Hull, of Ipswich, and of Exeter, right? And so those are all, and because they're not like, it's not London, right? But they're very unique and different towns that you can scratch part of the names off and make them medieval authentic sort of fantasy towns if you're playing in a fantasy setting. And there's lots more that I'm not remembering offhand right now. It's a big book, right? It's a lot of pages. So if you check that out, I'm sure it's 337 pages. I'm sure you're going to find it really worthwhile. It's also a bestseller already on drive-thru. And finally, before we get to the main topic, the Red Room store is where I have my current periodical, which is called the Pundit Files. And on the Pundit Files, we've already done 30 something. 30. We're now on the 30th issue of the Pundit Files, which is Legendary Magic Item Generator. Okay, issue 29 is the Diabolist. The Legendary Magic Item Generator is not a collection of magic items. It's a collection of tables that you can use if you want in your game for magic items to look less like they came from Magic Walmart or something, but instead you want them to have unique characteristics and qualities. You want each of them to have a story or a history or a name or be an association, so that magic feels special and doesn't feel like it's something that in your setting is just mass produced in some gnome factory somewhere. Okay, so that is the purpose of that book, and it gives you a lot of great guidelines to make magic items have better characteristics. Issue 29 is the Diabolist, which is a complete class for somebody who is basically a servant worshiper of a demon. It's a bad guy class or an NPC class. And there's 28 other issues. So go check them out at the Red Room store. While you're there, check out the Red Room's products. I believe right now they're having a big sale on the Wretchedverse products. I'm not being sponsored to say that. I just, they're friends of mine. They're hosting the Pundit Files there, and we don't have a financial relationship apart from that. They're hosting it the way Drive-Thru hosts some of my other products, right? It's not that they're partners of mine or something, but they're good people and they've got good products. So take a look at their stuff too. All right. So I think that's it for the ads, and I think we've got 45 people watching now. That's great. Okay, so let's get started with this. I'm gonna just take a look here. Did I miss any questions? Oh well, Boone has the one about tariffs. We're gonna get to that. Okay, Adino the Esnite says, how do I put this in there? Oh, there we go. Sorry guys. As usual, I'm technologically inept, but you all know that, or at least all of you who have been here before. Elephant in the room. If WotC D&D basically just becomes an intellectual property used for merchandise, what is your prognostication on the hobby's health? Well, that's a very interesting question. And it certainly seems at this point. Okay, so you guys might have heard, one of the things I was going to mention was that Chris Perkins just quit. He was the last real tie to early WotC. And now they have even less of a stable of even mildly competent talent left there. Perkins was probably the most talented guy still there up to the time that he quit, right? And the books are selling horribly badly, and the virtual tabletop is dead. So there's a very high chance if they, that they're going to largely, I'm not saying that they won't maybe ever publish any more books, right? I mean, they might try to put out something very rarely or occasionally, or in some very limited form or something else. They might put out some digital books instead of print books. I don't know. It'll all depend. What you probably won't see are many more like special box sets, like the Book of Many Things, which had a whole bunch of like doodads or stuff, or like the new starter set that they had done that had like a bunch of stuff. They're going to probably go back to books if this whole tariff thing sticks, right? Because otherwise it's too expensive. But yeah, there is a very high chance that they will keep trying to use D&D in the form of merchandising, right? Like Beholder plushies and T-shirts and stuff like that. And I think that happens without that kind of depends on D&D remaining enough of a cultural phenomenon. And now they still have, just now, like last year, it was Baldur's Gate 3, right? So that was a huge success. And they can kind of run off that for a little bit. But eventually, if you're just doing merchandising for something that isn't being produced anymore, you've got, or at least not in any real sense, and that isn't popular anymore, it's a dead end, right? Like that's not going to sell very well. So it's a problem for them. They to some degree they need to have, it doesn't have to be necessarily an RPG, but they have to have some kind of thing, games, movies, TV, action figures, something that they can then use to continue to generate popularity for the merchandise. The merchandise might be their core value in terms of what would generate the money, mind you, but it's still a problem if there's nothing to drive the impetus for people to buy that merchandise, right? So as far as D&D is concerned, like official WotC D&D, it's in really bad shape. As far as the rest of the hobby, okay, there are some bad points to there not being a kind of official D&D that is in good condition. It'll mean that there's going to be less people discovering D&D. Because the main thing WotC was good for, until it stopped being good for it, was to be able to draw in newbies who would discover this game, and they'd look at it and they'd get into it, and then a lot of them would only play, there'd be a ton of casual players. An enormous number of 5th edition people were casual players. What are you doing, cat? She's crawling up my leg. All right. Da, 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 da. Casual players. And a lot of those were never anything more than casual players, but some of them were. And then some of them would get into like third-party products. And then some of them would discover the OSR. And then some of them might end up buying my book, right? Or somebody else's book. So that is an issue, right? Because that it makes it more difficult for people to find out about us. On the other hand, as a rule, when official D&D is doing badly, the OSR is doing really well. Like it did that when 4th edition had come out. And if you haven't noticed, this year was the most successful year the OSR has ever had. And it was one of the worst years that official D&D ever had. So there is a lot of that, that other aspect, which is that with the existing hobby and the people who come to discover it for reasons other than being part of the, mainstream casuals, it becomes more appealing, obviously, right? If you know that if everybody's telling you, D&D, the official D&D is garbage, but there's this other stuff and you find it and then you start playing it, that is also beneficial. And you see this, for example, with the enormous success, if it is actually still going to be success, well, more on that in a moment, of like the new Shadow Dark crowdfunding. And a lot of these other there are a lot of OSR products that have been crowdfunded in the last year to significant success. Perhaps not as much as Shadow Dark, but a lot, right? Although some of those who have already managed to deal with delivery are probably in better shape now than any of the current ones might be. It depends on what they're doing and how they're doing it. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it is a problem, which is, again, one of the topics I wanted to get into here, which is somebody had already asked me about the tariffs, and the question about what is the tariff situation. Before that, Judd Goswick, Red Room has a 30% sale to celebrate their 3rd year anniversary. So make sure to check it out. The Red Room's Wretched Verse series of RPGs and RPG settings are fantastic. I've reviewed a lot of them on this channel. So if you go, if after the live stream you check out my review playlist, you'll see a bunch of their products, including one of my latest videos was an adventure that is a crossover between my own RPG, my own occult modern RPG, The Invisible College, and their Wretched Bell Epoch, which is set in, it's basically Penny Dreadful style action in the late 19th century or early 20th. And it's a great book. It's called The Alliance Conspiracy. How do you feel about Mearls pontificating post facto about the state of the game he in part created? It's not a good look. Well, remember that Mike Mearls has nothing to do with the latest edition, right? With the 2025 1 D&D edition. And a lot of the complaints he made were things that I was already saying too, right? That pointing out that these guys have taken in certain things that back in 2014 he and I would both had looked at and rejected, right? Like that we had tried to remove these things because they would overcomplicate the game, or because they would take players out of the state of being able to just focus on being immersed in the setting, because they would have to start thinking about numbers or what special powers or feats or things like that, right? And in a different way than just reactively, right? Because they'd have to start thinking about rules mastery. So that was one of the things, right? The other is that he correctly pointed out that gamers don't really want D&D gamers don't really want slice of life play with romance subplots and with and they don't want that style of art. They don't want that sort of look that the new D&D has, and that is directly costing them money. He's free to say that now. Of course, you could charge him for not having said that when he was still in charge of D&D, and there were already people really pushing for that, right? But I had warned everybody way back when Mike Mearls was still the lead of D&D there are a bunch of people who are saying, great, let's just see Mike Mearls get fired. You know, the woke people want him fired, but we want him fired too because he's bad and all this. And I said, well, look, he's not great. Yeah, he's kind of submitted himself to have to repeat the kind of woke propaganda that they're demanding he do in order to try to keep his job. That's true. But I guarantee you that Mike Mearls is the only guy. He's the little boy that has his finger in the dike there, the only thing holding back the complete collapse of the dam and the drowning of the entire village. And I was right. The second he was gone, that's when Wizards went from being slightly annoyingly woke to becoming just a complete shit show of woke nonsense, right? That accelerated. It was a literal flood all the way from like Candlekeep down to the Book of Many Things, right? All of it garbage in terms of quality, and each of it constantly doubling down in terms of wokeness, to the point of the new books, right? Where now there are literally more Black women in the art of those 3 books than there are Black women playing D&D in real life, right? That's how woke they demanded to be. And at the time, the reason the woke wanted him out is because they recognized immediately that he was a resisting force. He wasn't a hero of, you know, baseness because he wanted to keep his job, right? But he was doing what was still possible for him to say, no, we don't want to do this because this won't sell, right? And that was something, at least, right? But yeah, I'm not making him out to be a hero, but I'm saying that you know, he obviously made his choices. You can go after him for having said woke stuff on Twitter and so on as a means to try to placate the mobs, which is bad. But at the same time, he wasn't the guy he wasn't with that group of people that were trying to take over Wizards. He was the one guy that was still in their way. And once he was gone, there was nothing stopping them. So what else have we got here? Hello, sir. Why does it look like you're streaming from one of those white painted caves? Well, this is my house. My house is made in a style that is very particular to Uruguay. Actually, it's the Casa Pueblo style. If you do it's based on, there's this great Uruguayan architect, Baez Villaró was his name, and if you do a search for Casa Pueblo, all one word, right? You'd see what he made and the sort of style that it is, right? And so the white kind of stucco, I don't know if it's called stucco or not, but the white stucco is one of the characteristics, and also that it's got like rounded areas, right? Domes, holes, right? Like there's spaces that are very unusual. It's a very bohemian house, but I love it. It's really good. The kitchen is not actually, it's actually an outlier. It was clearly at some point remodeled, or it was never either that, or that was like how it originally looked, and the rest of the house was remodeled into the style of the Casa Pueblo architecture. Because you're right, that kitchen looks much more like a kind of I don't know, like a 1950s kitchen or something. All right, what else have we got here? Honk says, I would love to know more about Hexcrawl, OSR, and Conan-like story systems. Well, I can't help you much about Conan, but as far as OSR products, if you check out in the description of this video, if you expand the little more thing, and you're going to see a whole bunch of links there. And all of my RPGs are essentially what are called sandboxes, which Hexcrawl is one type of sandbox, but a sandbox can be more than just a Hexcrawl. So stuff like Sword and Caravan, which is an entire campaign set in the Third Crusade and all along the Silk Road in the same time as the Third Crusade and all along the Silk Road from Acre all the way to China, right? From one end to the other. And it's got all kinds of tables and mechanics that allow you to run the game as a sandbox, where you as the DM are not making a plot. You're rolling on tables to determine events for your characters. I've been running a very long campaign of Sword and Caravan, and a lot of my players sometimes, now they all know, right? But new players, when they were starting, thought that I was making these intricate plot lines, and actually all I was doing was using like the generators for, city encounters, for city events, for travel encounters, for Wilderland encounters, for different location elements when you go to a place, right? If you go to like a tea house, or if you go to a merchant, if you join a merchant caravan, or all kinds of stuff like that, right? So check that out. Check out Baptism of Fire. It has the same sort of thing. Overboard asks, where is John? All right, so for anyone who has arrived here late and did not check social media, neither mine nor John's, unfortunately, I've been trying to get John on here for like since episode 2, right? So that is for like about 12 weeks now. We've been trying to coordinate for him to show up, and he was finally going to show up today, and then he got sick today, and he is apparently sick, like in bed sick, right? So he was not able to make it. So instead, I am having a regular live stream. I'm sorry to disappoint, but we are talking about a number of very interesting topics. We're going to be talking in a moment about the question of tariffs, and we're also going to talk about Kickstarters, and we're going to answer all of your questions. If you have questions that are relevant about me, or about stuff you want me to talk about regarding what's going on in the hobby, we can get to all that. Frank Estrosa says, isn't it better that it all crashes so they pay the consequences versus having a coward that wasn't really doing anything in effect? Well, he was, though. He was slowing, he was limiting the damage that they could do, right? And remember that up until basically the end of Mike Mearls' time as head of D&D, it was the most successful edition of D&D Wizards had ever had. And it is strongly debatable. Like, it's very hard for us to determine exactly whether it was more or less successful, especially if you adapt it to like contextually, right? To like you prorate for the difference in time and whatnot. If it wasn't more successful than first edition, it probably was. It might not have been more successful than the basic expert set. Like BX was probably the most, well, especially the basic set was probably the best-selling D&D product of all time. I mean, the like, the red box basic set, the original one, right? But it was very, very close, right? So that meant that a lot of people got into it, and those people left after Mike Mearls left, and the thing became increasingly woke, right? With every product from Candlekeep onwards, with the exception of very slight jumps for a couple of things that were that had unique appeal, most notably like Dragonlance. I think its sales went up just briefly, but it was because it was Dragonlance on the cover, right? And that was the only reason it slightly peaked back up again, and then it plummeted with the later products, right? So, they were with a style of play, even if it wasn't like OSR style, but they were with a style of play that was not stupid, right? And most of the people left, right? By the end of it, like the sales of like the last couple of products that they did before going into the new edition were absolutely abysmal, right? The Radiant Citadel it sold like apparently something like 11,000 copies from what I've heard. And if that's true, like, that's horrifically bad. There's tons of like individuals who have sold more than 11,000 copies of a book. Captain Conway says, I like the Casapulo Hotel. When I went to Uruguay, spent some time in Trump Tower, Punta del Este. This was many years ago. There you go. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. So you know what I'm talking about, and you can tell the similarity in the style here. Frank Destroso says, Honk, you really won't be disappointed playing one of Pundit's books, not to Schiller fanboy, it's just true. Lijou says, what's your overall opinion of Mike Mearls' attempted redemption? Well, you know, Mike and I haven't talked in a very long time, right? And I think that was because he was ordered not to. And, you know, since then he hasn't reached, since he left finally Wizards, he hasn't reached out either. But, you know, there was a time when we were close friends, right? Like that's part of why I got hired. And we had very similar ideas of what RPGs should be like. And we worked incredibly well together when I was acting as a consultant for him. And it was a very productive creative endeavor, which is something for me that's kind of, I do have creative endeavors with my publishers, right? But it's not the same because they're not like, we're not working on the same thing. I'm doing the writing, and that's my job, and then they do the production values of the book, which is their job. And some of them do wonderful jobs. Most of them, almost all of them, do wonderful jobs in the production. But it's not like we're you know, shooting ideas off each other. And that was kind of what it was like there with Mike Mearls. And so, like, you know, I think Mike, he's not, from everything I know, and from, you know, I've got the emails, right? So I know that he is not like a high-level woke dude, right? I can't promise that he doesn't vote Democrat, right? I don't know that for sure, but I suspect it might be true. I don't know if he would have done it this time or not, but you know, I'm sure that he is still a kind of a West Coast liberal, but he was not a woke fanatic or something like that. And he, you know, I think that he is a guy that certainly proved he had important capabilities when it came to game design. Now, you don't have to like the game, right? Because there's a lot of people that make that mistake, that they're like, well, you know, why are you even bragging, Pundit, about having made 5th edition? Because it's it sucks ass, right? I'm like, look, I was hired to make the most commercially successful game possible, and that's what I did, and that's what it was, right? It was the most commercially successful game, without a doubt, of Wizards of the Coast, right? Of the D&D line. And so you have to recognize that is a part of good design, right? That is the design was made with very specific goals to bring in casuals into the game, and for those casual people to be able to enjoy the game without being like overruled, like in earlier editions, by people who were deep into rules expertise, right? Where their characters would be so much better than the guy that doesn't know what he's doing that it basically means that they're useless compared to him, or things like that. And it really worked. It was a very good system. Yeah, and he's a very good game designer, and I'm sure he's going to do other things. Now, would it be nice to see him at some point give an apology to gamers about like some of the comments he did while he was at Wizards? Yeah, that would be nice. You know, I would say that would be a very good idea. And so unless he does that, I can understand some people, other people than myself, being still mad at him and not willing to, you know, like, I don't know, buy stuff that he makes or something like that, right? But I can tell you that what he did, I'm sure, was about an attempt to continue working at the job he loved, right? And you know, for a lot of us, that might not have been our choice. It wouldn't have been my choice. But I can also understand that from people, right? Like, I mean, it is a dream job for a lot of people, right? I mean, for me, making RPGs is a dream job in general. I quickly realized as soon as I saw how Wizards worked, that I would never want to work full time at Wizards, right? In particular. But I mean, it was working on that edition of D&D is still a kind of a dream, because I can remember 11-year-old me having fantasies about someday working on D&D, right? I would have imagined in Wisconsin, because that's how old I am, right? But you know, this idea that I would have my name on a D&D book, right? And now it literally happened, right? So it was a great job, right? I wouldn't sacrifice my principles for it, but I can understand that for some people, and also in different situations, right? Like I've always been a kind of free spirit, and don't have debt, and I don't have a bunch of, you know, I don't have dependents apart from the cat, you know, so it's a different thing, and other people might have some of those things, right? Yeah. So, but like I said, if he doesn't kind of express some remorse for how he dealt with some of the customers at the time he was at D&D, then I can understand why some people wouldn't want to associate with him. Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying you should forgive him without him showing some kind of remorse. Antimatter Carp. This pipe. Well, this is a Ben Wade Rhodesian, and currently inside it is Argento Latakia, which is an Argentine all natural, 100% natural blend of. It's actually a burley Latakia blend, and I really love it. For some reason, this brand Argento, which you can only really get in like Argentina and Uruguay, I think, makes incredibly nice burley, and they also have imported Syrian Latakia that they put into this particular blend. So if you know pipes, you know that some of you, at least if you like Latakia, would be salivating right now. All right, next up. Frank Destrosa says, quick shout out to the Bill the Elf channel, right? Bill the Elf is one of my players on my longest running campaign, which is World of the Last Sun. You can see links to the world book for World of the Last Sun in the description below. And he records the audio of our play sessions. And you can, if you want to see me DMing, albeit, you know, unfortunately, right, because I'm much better known for like my medieval authentic stuff, right? Like, you know, Lion and Dragon, Cults of Chaos, all of that sort of thing, right? But the only thing that I have recorded is World of the Last Sun, which is gonzo fantasy. Right? It's really weird, hilarious fantasy that is very different from when I'm running like Baptism of Fire or Sword and Caravan, you know. But it is very fun to check out for those people who like listening to other people playing RPGs. Kevin, unfortunately, the main topic at the moment is that Jon Del Arroz wasn't able to make it because he got sick, and he informed me on rather short notice, so we didn't get another person. But no, the main topic I want to talk about right now is going to be the tariffs, the Trump tariffs, as they whatever. And some of you might have heard, for example, that some of the RPG designers or RPG companies are in a tizzy, other game companies. Steve Jackson Games is absolutely hysterical about it, apparently. And I've heard at least one person on the RPGsite.com say, well, you know, if Steve Jackson Games goes under because of the Trump tariffs, that'll be at least one good thing that the tariffs did at this point, you know. For those of you who don't know, Steve Jackson, legendary figure in the RPG field, has an extremely severe case of Trump derangement syndrome. Like we're talking at like Rosie O'Donnell levels, or maybe Mark Hamill levels of Trump derangement. It's really sad. Kevin says, I know a certain medieval authentic RPG that's probably sold over 11,000 copies. Well, yeah, you know, I don't know the exact count as such, but given that Lion and Dragon is a platinum bestseller now, and that's just in drive-through because it also sold on Lulu, I think. Same with Dark Albion, right? So there's a very good chance that those books are in that ball game, right, in terms of sales, right? So it's you know, that tells you how bad it is when you're selling so low. If you're Wizards of the Coast, right? If you're me, it's fantastic, right? That's really good sales. but for Wizards of the Coast, 11,000 is it's a nightmare. It's a disaster. Overkill Joe says, would you ever consider teaming up with Mearls on a project again? Well, it'd have to be a very special project, not because of Mearls, but because I don't tend to do a lot of team ups. But I guess if maybe if it was some kind of like a licensed game that was something that was near and dear to my heart or something like that, and he wanted, we were going to work on it together or something like that, but it was going to be like for some major publisher, and I just can't resist. Right, like the two games that I participated in the creation of that were kind of dreams of mine, I've sort of done, because one was obviously D&D, and then the other one was the Doctor Who RPG for Cubicle 7. But I guess there might be some other things, right? Like, I don't know. I guess maybe if I was asked to do a new edition of Pendragon or something, but I'm not even sure about that. I'd have to think about it, but I wouldn't. I can't say for sure. No, I mean, it's like, no, I'm not saying Mearls is dead to me or something like that. I'm a forgiving guy, I guess, to some extent. After hearing your intentions of making the game modular, I read the 5 ebooks, and aside from the terrible art, they are in fact very well made, especially the DM's guide. Yeah, the DM's guide is really good. Yeah, it is really a good product there. All right, so tariffs, but actually tariffs will end up being lower tariffs. Yeah, that's more or less it. So like, first we have to preface any discussion. Oh yeah, and it's also, you're right. Asnight is right. It's Lion and Dragon is also on Amazon. But I'd prefer you buy it at drive-through, because Amazon is really, really shitty in terms of like how much profit you get from the sale of a book. Like they're really bad these days. So what was I saying? Yeah, we have to preface any discussion on tariffs with the fact that they could be gone in 48 hours, or they could be replaced by a massive series of free trade deals now, and suddenly everybody like tries to get on board with open and total reciprocal free trade instead of reciprocal tariffs. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are panicking about it. Steve Jackson is one of them. But besides that, so are a whole bunch of indie game designers. And I'm not, and I'll tell you why. We were just talking about, Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion. Those are available on drive-through. They're available on Lulu, and they're available on Amazon. Most of my other books are available on drive-through, and a significant amount are also available on Amazon. They are print-on-demand books. I've always done it that way. And people always said, well, why don't you do a Kickstarter? Right? Are you afraid? Well, at one point I figured Kickstarter might throw me out because of, there was a certain time period where Kickstarter was really going against woke people. But it wasn't just Kickstarter that I didn't do. I didn't do any kind of crowdfunding. And I said, well, because I've never seen really the point of it. I'm not saying I would never do it. If a publisher really thought it was the way to go, I might say yes. But from my point of view, my whole project of like work is based on producing a really good book, putting it out, and then selling it. And then the people who want to buy it will know exactly what they're getting. The book is done. There is no damage to my reputation, which is a real problem with a lot of Kickstarters, right? And then my, kind of the way I've translated this into a full-time living is by what's called the long tail, which is that, like, Lion and Dragon was published in 2017. Okay, I think it was early 2017. So that is 8 years ago. And any of this or any other book that I've ever made most of the sales happen in the first 2 or 3 or 4 months. And then after that, it drops off, but it never drops to zero. It drops to somewhere, to some settling point. In some cases, that settling point might be like $3 a month, right? Or in some cases, that selling point might be $30 a month. But then it stays around that level, more or less, forever. And that's called the long tail. It's when you have, you know, print on demand, that's what happens, right? And so if I've published dozens of print books, which I have, and hundreds of PDFs, which I have, all of them are affected by the long tail. So a very large part of the income I earn is not from the book I've written just now. It's not from 101 Sarmatians, right? It's from all of these books put together, right? And so to me, I find that a much more secure way of doing things than going with a crowdfunding, where you get a whole ton of money, maybe if you're lucky, because some people aren't crowdfunding, but in general, with the OSR these days, if you've got a good idea and you've got decent marketing, you're likely to be funded. There's a good chance you will be funded, right? And you will, but then the problems come in, right? Because you are playing a goddamn guessing game in terms of what, like the different stretch goals and things like that you make, how much money it is. You're estimating how much is it going to cost you to print the number of books that you're making, right? Because you're going to have like 500 books or whatever, or 1,000 books, right? And then you have to see, will it cost that much? And then you have to determine with the stretch goals, well, how much is it going to cost to pay people for the extra art of this? Or do I do AI art and then get a bunch of people pissed off at me, or something like that? And what about, these other authors that I've had to bring in to do these other modules that are other stretch goals? And the bigger you succeed, the higher that problem becomes. There's one of the people we interviewed here was the creator of, was it the Gods of the Forbidden North trilogy, which has been a super successful trilogy of like campaign level adventure books for OSE that are spectacular books. At least the first volume, which I've read and reviewed here, is a spectacular book. And when he interviewed me, he had already gotten the first one was done, the second one had just shipped, I think, and he was working on the third Kickstarter. And all of these were big successes, not like Shadow Dark big, but pretty big successes, like way beyond his minimum level, his funding level, right? Like way beyond it. And he confessed on the show that with this third book, he was hoping to break even. So he would come out of all that period of like, what was, 3 to 5 years of work, making almost no money, in spite of having had 3 like hugely successful Kickstarters. So that's the danger with Kickstarter. And now you've got a bigger problem, because a lot of these Kickstarter things, first of all, you have to print the books, right? And the books, you have to make those books, and where are you printing them, right? If you're printing them in America, you probably don't have a problem. If you're printing them in China, all of a sudden that $10,000 order of books is going to cost you $15,400, right? So you've got to pull another $5,500 out of your ass to be able to cover it. And if you can't cover it, you're not getting those books, and then you're in real trouble, right? So there's all of those issues that are involved, and now the tariffs for a bunch of people, and it's even worse for people who are making games, because a lot of the games, like the doodads and all that stuff in the games, it's much more likely that you've gone to an offshore source to provide them. So there's if any of the people, and I don't know if that's the case with Shadow Dark or not, right? I'm not sure if they've got like doodads in their latest crowdfunder, or if it's just books. If it's just books and they were smart enough to have them printed in America, they might be totally safe. But otherwise, they might have raised like $2 million, but then they're gonna, suddenly gonna get hit by a massive tariff fee. And did they budget for that? Like, did anyone budget for that, right? Like, it's that's a real issue, right? Which is why I don't really care much for doing, Kickstarters type stuff, because I'm doing just fine the way I am, right? I am incredibly comfortable at this moment doing things the way I do them, between my books, my book sales, and the occasional super chat on live streams to get toys for my cat. That is all I really need. So I think that's the serious part of this discussion. And then there's the funny part, which I do find really amusing, which is how many of these companies, there's tons of these game companies. I'm not saying just RPG companies, but like, companies that make board games and stuff like that. And all of them, or a great number of them, I'm not going to say all of them, obviously, there's definitely some based guys that are doing good stuff. But most of them are highly, highly woke. And what we see is the irony of them crying and screaming in rage about the fact that they're expected to pay more now to use slave labor, right? Because that's what this really is, right? That the reason China is cheaper than the US for making these doodads for their board games is because they have not quite slave labor, but serf labor at the very least, right? Like that they have these people that have no other choice. They have to work in these sorts of places. If it's not one factory, it's going to be another one, and it's in horrible conditions, and it's for almost no pay. And that is what these super woke, supposedly, caring about equity and the third world and the global south are so concerned about, is that they are now not able to exploit third world peasants that have been forced into cities to work in factories. And that is pretty ridiculous, isn't it? I see someone made a comment related to that. Yeah, we deserve cheap borderline slave labor for it. Yeah, that's not just SJG. That's a whole. If you watch on X, on Twitter, there's a whole bunch of people that are crying and screaming about how their business plans are ruined because Trump decided to punish them for using slave labor. Right? They're not saying it in that way, right? They're saying, "Oh, this is a disastrous policy of President Trump," and blah blah blah, right? But it's like the disastrous policy they're complaining about is him not rewarding people for using slave labor. So let me just catch up a bit on the comments here. Yishu says I should start a printing press. Look, if you're in America, if you're in the United States, and you have money that you can invest on a business, absolutely start a printing business, because like that's a big business, right? Even without the tariffs, like before there were tariffs, if you were a local printer, you'd still eat up, because there's such a huge demand for printing now, from print on demand. Anybody who opens a printer, I think, is good. Like unless they do something absolutely moronic. I don't know. They have their storefront on Mount McKinley or something, right? Instead of in a normal town. Unless you do something unbelievably incompetent, you're going to. It's literally a money printing business, right? You're printing money as you print these books. Though let's hope not literally exactly, but so yeah. That is it is a very good idea to have if you can. Baptism of Fire is a juggernaut. Well, it absolutely is a juggernaut. It's Baptism of Fire is 375 pages, and if you then get 101 Sarmatians, you get another 100 pages of extra information for your setting and campaign. So check it out. Richard Kuhn says, what you're saying is don't sell goods you don't have yet. Yeah, absolutely. And that is the opposite of what Kickstarter says, right? And everybody knows that officially you're not paying, when you're putting money into a Kickstarter, you're not entering into a contract that you will receive that product. You are funding the project. And if the project never appears, you're kind of shit out of luck for the most part, from what I understand. Let me see here. What else have we got? Yeah, iPhone entitlement activists will still use the slave labor made phone, of course. Well, don't forget, they're doing it for the sake of the proletariat. Yeah. There was partly a printing crisis around the time COVID started, but that was largely because of the breakdown of supply lines, right? So it was the same thing, basically, right? The bunch of people who were trying to print stuff in China, suddenly China was shut down, and there aren't enough printers in North America to cover that, right? And you have them. If you have them, you know. Well, Dino the S9 makes an important point there. The problem often is paper supply. That might be true. You have to work those things out, but I'm guessing those are both growth businesses. People are willing to pay print on demand for their vanity publishing, which is 99% of the RPG industry. Well, I'm not paying for my vanity publishing. I'm paying for I'm not paying anything. I'm getting paid for making products that are actually selling to other people, you know. But I think I know what you mean, Kevin, that there are, you know, it's interesting that probably like 90% of drive-through RPG products are like essentially dead product, like they're products that don't sell at all, right? But that is, they're orphan products or what have you, that a lot of those are some guy that said, well, you know, I'm going to become a big game designer, and they do something and they don't have good networking, or the product clearly isn't good and it just never gets off the ground, and so they make a copy for themselves, I guess. But there are easier ways to do that if that's all you want to do. Paper mills make more money on toilet. That's an interesting point. Paper mills make more money on toilet paper and feminine hygiene products, I guess. My name says, so I was just reading our copy of Gauntlet Fantasy Companion, The Kitchen Sink. Is that a reference? Well, it's sort of a reference. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it's it's a reference to the roguelike game NetHack, where occasionally in the dungeon you would be able to find a kitchen sink. You guys all know that I famously do not play video games, but I did play video games when I was a kid. When I was a kid, pretty much the only dungeon crawling video game there was, computer game actually, was NetHack, and I loved it. And so that's always been a big inspiration for me in terms of particularly kind of some of the Gonzo elements, right? Both the kitchen sink and Dungeon Chef, which is the guide to what type of creatures you can eat, right? And what happens if you eat them. Those are both inspired in part by NetHack. But in and of itself, in NetHack, that was a reference to the idea of a place having everything but the kitchen sink, and in this case, they would sometimes have the kitchen sink. Okay, so Lijou touches something else I was going to kind of mention, that what's going to change now, if these tariffs persist for any amount of time, is that a lot of the gimmick tabletop products, like with magnetic travel maps or dice towers, or like all these like box sets that come with special cue cards, or with like tokens, or with things like that, or all of that ups the price in a really big way. That's why board games are much more screwed than RPGs, because an RPG is like, it's a book, right? And a book, it'll cost more, but it's not. First of all, it'll be easier to produce a book in North America than a game, and second, the game pieces are a bigger factor that will increase costs, right? So it's interesting because up until this year, there seemed to be a rising trend towards more and more like complex board games with fiddly nonsense, and also that showing up in RPG products. And it showed up, for example, in the Book of Many Things, right, which was a box set that had a bunch of stuff in it. And it was I think it was going to become a big part of the kind of book merchandising wing of Wizards of the Coast, where, you know, instead of just making a book like, let's say, you know, Candlekeep, which is just a hardback book with a bunch of pages and art in it, right? They were going to try to gussy it up by having it as like a kind of a box or a slipcase set that would also have, I don't know, a little bag with some tokens or whatever stuff, right? That was included in part as part of the some important part of the adventure or the game or whatever. And you know, then that would justify them selling it, as they did with the Book of Many Things, for like $100 or whatever, right? And it's you know, not. It's just, it makes it merchandise instead of a book, right? It makes it something that you have to show off more than anything. And now they might have to turn around from that too, because it might be prohibitive for them to do it. Hasbro is going to have a real problem in general. You know, toys are a big problem, you know. Worked at a publishing factory for Penguin that shut down years ago. The outsourcing of our printing companies did not go unnoticed. Yeah, that is one of the big areas of outsourcing, you know, to other countries. And I can't say for sure what's going to happen here, but I was watching the interview with Besant, the Treasury Secretary, I think he is, and he was saying that more so than wanting free trade agreements, he suggested that the Trump White House, what it really wants is for foreign countries to, you know, foreign companies rather than countries, to invest in making factories or you know, setting up businesses in America, you know, on American soil, so it makes American jobs. So we'll see how that goes. It's an interesting question. Tabletop Gaming says, one can do all the writing for a book before doing a Kickstarter for the book. That is, I'm going to stop you right there. That is true. You absolutely could. And in fact, I have often said, I've done more than a couple of videos where I tell people what to do if they want to do a Kickstarter. And the thing I say is the book that you are making, finish it before you begin the Kickstarter. Like, maybe you don't have to finish like the art, but you have to finish the text. The book has to be ready when you start the Kickstarter, not sometime after you end it, right? And an enormous number of people very clearly don't do that, right? And you see that from a number of like Kickstarters that promised the moon, and then turns out that they hadn't written a damn thing yet, or hardly anything. But yeah, if you're doing it the right way, at the very least, you should have the book done beforehand. It's very important. The re-release of Gamma World had pogs other than a set of cards for mutations. It's less expensive, but still more than a book. Yeah, that's true. Steambub says tariffs will increase the price of things, but hopefully Trump's big beautiful bill will cut a bunch of taxes, so it'll offset the price increase. Yeah, let's hope so for you guys. Honestly, I like to make handmade tabletop scenery. I'm thinking I might actually be able to sell them thanks to tariffs. Well, you know, one of the things that's really interesting is that as we go along, 3D printing is going to become more and more advanced, and you'll be able to make more and more things out of it. And then suddenly there'll be literal cottage industries of people doing stuff with a 3D printer, right? Either maybe at first with a collective that has access to 3D printers, and eventually, as 3D printers become more and more efficient and more easily affordable, individuals will just have it, right? And then they'll all be making kind of crazy stuff with it. Between that, especially if you have that combined with AI, I mean, Jesus. So there are people that are saying, oh yeah, well, yeah, we're just gonna, what are you gonna do? You're just gonna have like the factory out in the middle of the countryside, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, just fucking wait, you know, like, yeah, there are these people that act like, well, I did a tweet where I said, you know, yeah, it's terribly unfortunate that sneaker trees only grow in Vietnam, right? Like as if that's the only place you can make them, because that's where they grow, right? In the sneaker trees. But in the future, it's the factories are not going to be the thing, right? Like they're not, for a bunch of stuff. There's probably still going to be some things that you're going to need a big factory to do, but for a lot of stuff, it won't be. And especially for stuff like that, you know, if you're going to make a tabletop game of some kind with like little pieces, like Monopoly or something, it's the period of time from between now and when you will be able to like make a board and little pieces and stuff like that that'll look basically okay is very short. I think it's just a matter of years, perhaps, that someone could do that, you know. I mean, technically someone could do it now, right? But it's still not going to look great. It's still not going to be perfect. But in a few years, you know, the homegrown industry of people making like their own games could be very big. Of course, the question is then, are you going to be selling the games? Like, are you going to wrap up the games in a box and sell them somewhere? Or are you going to be selling the blueprints that other people will feed into their 3D printers or instruct their AIs to make the thing at home? Like, are you actually just going to, is all that you need to sell is the plans, you know? My name has a 3D printer, and he says he could already make some pretty impressive stuff. Yeah, well, and imagine, you know, I'm sure that some of that stuff is stuff that you couldn't have done like 4 years ago. And imagine what you're going to be able to do 4 years from now. Okay. So I think I'm actually caught up. My goodness. Well, all right. Is there something else I was going to talk about? I had a ton of questions for John, but most of them don't really apply without him here. Oh, hang on. I had a. What else was there? Is there something else? Good Lord. Oh, no, that we already covered that, didn't we? I already talked about Chris Perkins, right? He was the last semi-competent guy there, and he wasn't great, but he was better than what's left. And now there's like almost nothing left, really. Oh shit. Sorry, did that by accident. I have no idea what the Trench Crusade Wargame debacle was. I'm sorry. Judd Gossick says, tell us about the sci-fi setting you are working on. Well, in the Pundit Files, I've had several issues of the Pundit Files now that are part of a sci-fi setting. I made a very thin, I don't think I have it on, where do I have it here? I ought to have it somewhere here. Where is it? Well, maybe not. Maybe I left it downstairs. Yeah, okay. So anyway, sorry. I have a very small RPG. It's a 32-page RPG. The link is in the description below. It's called Star Adventurer. And that book is an OSR space opera style sci-fi game, but it's only like the rules, right? It's got mechanics. It's got a set of like archetypal alien types that you can use. It's got classes. It's got the equipment. It's got starship rules. It's got all the combat rules. It's a complete RPG. It's only about 33 pages long at the most. Okay, and a lot of people love it. It's a gold bestseller. It's very popular. At least it was gold last time I checked. It might be platinum by now. Who knows? But it has no setting of its own. Right? It was made. Honestly, it was made when I wanted to run a Star Wars campaign, which I did, and it worked very well with that. But after that, I eventually started thinking about, well, what would be another type of sci-fi campaign that I could make on the basis of Star Adventurer. And I've eventually come up with a setting called Sons of Heaven, which is set 20,000 years into the future. And it's after the world has been, after humanity was basically enslaved by an alien race and scattered among the stars, and then they freed themselves and formed a space confederation that was very successful until there was a cataclysmic war, galactic war, that destroyed that confederation. And that is where you start the game, with like playing remnants of the human confederation, or free runners, guys that are just out to make a buck, that have a spaceship, traveling through these places that are basically like a post-collapse galaxy, or at least galactic region, where they are likely to find all kinds of strange things, right? Like there are some places that still have remnants of civilization, some places that are just completely dead, some that have been conquered, some all sorts of stuff like that. And so it's an adventuring type of game, though you can turn it into a big campaign of like, let's bring back the Federation or something, or the Confederation rather. And it's got, I've planned out like what are the different races that exist, most of which are like older and scarier in certain ways than humans. What is the culture that they have, right, in the human confederation, and I think that's very interesting. Hang on a sec, let me do a couple of these. We've got a couple more super chats. Thank you, Wayne Brack, $20 super chat. Thank you so much. I'm late, but I want your opinion on Jeremy Crawford taking over. Woke of the Coast is a dead company to me, and I think to the hobby at this point. Now, okay, my first question, Wayne, is do you have it confirmed that Jeremy Crawford has taken over? I'm not sure about that. Keep in mind that he was Perkin. What's his name? Shit. I'm having a brain fart here. Chris Perkin was only, he was the story director of D&D, right? There's the project lead. Of course, there's the CEO, but nobody, he's not going to be doing anything, right? And there's like the project lead, the story director, and then there's a couple of other positions, right? And so whoever takes over Perkins' position, which might be Jeremy Crawford, doesn't mean that they're like the boss, right? It does mean, though, that they're kind of going to be like in charge of organizing a lot of the production. Like, I'm not sure, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Jason Tondro's current position is higher than Perkins was. So, yeah, I'm not sure. But the point is, I don't think any of that matters very much, because I'm not sure how much work they're going to be doing there, right? Like, a lot of it might just be curating existing stuff, and that's it, right? Like, remember, the VTT has been gutted, and they might change it. They might try again, right? Like, this was I did a video where there was this big question of will Wizards of the Coast repeat the error they made in 4th edition? Like, we now know that within 3 months at the latest of having released 4th edition, they knew it was a disastrous failure. They knew they had lost 66% of their customer base. And instead of saying, well, we've got to reverse course, or we've got to stop, or we just should like halt everything, or we should go back, instead of doing any of those things, they doubled down. And then they kept doubling down for several years, where they ended up losing way more because they didn't recognize they were in a money pit that was never going to be able to be filled. And I think they're at risk of the exact same thing here, right? So it is theoretically possible that they'll go, well, you know, the BGT didn't work, but so now let's just try to make a whole bunch of more books and make them really, you know, exciting and filled with strong Black women so that everybody will want to play them. And it'll go horribly, horribly bad. And it'll go especially bad with these people. I mean, Jeremy Crawford, you know, like he's pretty talentless. Let's put it that way. But then again, so is Tondra. I think maybe Tondra is maybe slightly more technically capable than Crawford. But those are like the two, and those are like by far the two most knowledgeable sages that Wizards of the Coast have left. And they're both, at best, you could describe them as mediocrities, right? So it's very sad, you know. And so there's nothing for it, right? All right, so Space Zeus says, what's your longest running campaign using your own rule set? And is it the campaign I spend years healing demon worshipping gypsies in? Using one of my own rule sets, because technically World of the Last Sun, I used the material that had become the Last Sun book and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, but those are setting books and, you know, supplemental books, and World of the Last Sun is actually a DCC campaign. So taking that one away, I believe that the longest campaign I've made using my own rule set would probably be the original Albion campaign. Now, technically, that started as a Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign, but it very quickly morphed into changing rules as we went along into what became the kind of the basis of Lion and Dragon. So I think, because that one ran for, I think, 6.5 years. So, and I don't think that the Sword and Caravan campaign, which is the one that you're in, Space Zeus, has gone for 6.5 years yet. It could be beaten, though. It's not that's not too hard, right? But the Last Sun has been going on for over 12 years now, so it's quite a bit bigger. All right, so I'm sorry. Before I went into, thank you very much for the super chat. That's $10. I appreciate it, and so will Domino. And I was talking about the Sons of Heaven. Oh, well, hang on. We've got another super chat. $10 from Snake Oil Sean. He says, "Hail Pundit, if you were to build a campaign based more on Futurama than Star Wars, would it resemble something like a sci-fi version of your Gonzo Fantasy Companion?" Well, yeah, I guess so. I guess it would resemble that. I don't know if that's something I'd be super into doing, but you know, it might actually resemble Spaceballs more than Futurama, I think. But you know, the Gonzo Fantasy Companion is full of sci-fi stuff because it's technically World of the Last Sun is a science fiction setting, right? Like, it's well established. God is a computer that's gone crazy. Demons and angels are essentially like their programs. The ancients that saved the universe from the last survivors of the universe are actually just like some kind of super race. And you know, like all of that. So magic is people who are able to manipulate nanite technology that's all over the place, but the people have forgotten how it really works. You know, so it's all kind of a substitute science stuff. You know. And then on top of that, there's high-tech items of all kinds, right? There's people going around with like laser rifles and stuff like that too, right? Because there's a mix of societies all the way from like caveman-like barbarism all the way up to like literal Star Wars with lightsabers and monofilament whips and, you know, teleporters, you know, like everything in the entire range, right, in that world. But yes. I would choose Spaceballs over Futurama. That's an odd question, Snake Oil, but There you go. But the Gonzo Fantasy Companion has a lot of crazy stuff, and it's a lot of fun, and I recommend you check it out if you want to add some craziness to your own fantasy. All right, Sons of Heaven. So I've made a number. I was going to make like a book for it, but I realized over time that as I've got these other projects that are stacking up, it might take me a really long time before I got around to writing it as like a complete source book. So it might be easier for me to write it bit by bit in issues of the Pundit files, right? So in the Pundit files, we have a number of these that have already come out and others that are going to be coming out as we go. So we have, where was the first one here? Random Space Opera Worlds, which is the first one that you have, which basically generates worlds in the ruined Confederation that you can go to explore in, and have, you know, they're different, what they're like and what their dangers are. It's a very good random generator for, you know, traveling around in different star systems. Then there was Space Opera Adventure Locations, which are like locales. They're a collection of different, and I'll probably make another couple of these that are like different places that you would find in different sort of cities of the Confederation, with different combinations of details as to like if the planet you're on is still, you know, relatively advanced, or if it is like fallen back into barbarism. And there's another one that is coming very soon. It's on tap, let's say, for I'm not sure if it's the next one. I'm not sure if it's number 31. I think it might be number 31 actually. The next one that'll come out, which is what's it called here? It is the High-Tech Ruins, right? So that'll be a place essentially for if you go to like worlds that are pretty much dead, and yet you find remnants of Confederation bases there or stuff like that, and how they've been, you know, taken over by dangerous xenomorphs and other things of that sort. You know? So those are the first ones I'm doing. Eventually, I'm going to have to do some like campaign building, and I don't know if I'm going to do those as Pundit files, or if I'm going to take all the Pundit files I've done so far, put them all together, and then add the campaign details of the world. Because there's a lot of culture lore of the different races that I've already kind of come up with, though not necessarily written. So I think it's going to be a very interesting sci-fi setting. It's going to be quite different from. It's definitely not Star Wars, though it has some Star Wars-y type things. It's not Dune, but it's got a couple of Dune-y type things also. You know, my actual inspirations for it are kind of like the Bronze Age collapse and several books of the Old Testament. So like those are my main inspirations for this sci-fi setting I'm making. Because remember, I don't read a lot of sci-fi anymore. I read a lot as a kid, so I know the classics. But you know, I'm not Jon Del Arroz. I've never read Jon Del Arroz. I have to admit. I'm sorry, John. But I think it's going to be a hell of a setting when it comes out. All right. Any other questions, or should we start wrapping this up? I don't know. How many people do we have watching still? Oh, we got 69. Look at that. That's a special number. And especially when we're talking about World of the Last Sun. Gonzo Fantasy Companion is filled with sci-fi stuff. It's crazy. It's got everything. Some of the items are hilariously booby-trapped. I'm glad you like it, my name. I think it's a great book. I think people really should check it out, the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, if you in any way enjoy any elements of Gonzo Fantasy, because there's like almost all of. See, the Last Sun book is a setting. Now, it's a setting that's very modular, right? It points at certain specific areas of the World of the Last Sun, and so you could take those or leave them, right? And so you could play in the Last Sun setting, or you could like take one of these places like Arkham or High Bay or the Shithole or wherever else, you know, the floating city of Lol, and put them into your own game. You could do that. But the Gonzo Fantasy Companion is not setting material. It's like content material. It has generators for for creating mutant races, generators for creating animal races, generators for creating weird humanoids or non-humanoid races. It has a whole bunch of weird magic items. It has stuff like, you know, the kitchen sink. It has high-tech weapons. It has all kinds of stuff that you can pick and choose from these and put them into your game. And so if you're playing a kind of fantasy game that's a little bit gonzo, you may pick a few of these things and put them into your game. And if not, you might pick a lot of these things and so on and so forth, right? And the generators are really good. Like, I mean, if you want to create a weird fantasy race for any OSR game, the weird fantasy race generator will let you do that. And with like, you know, some rules, and you make some choices, and it's very, very fast, right? And you will be guaranteed to have a race that every time you roll it, it's going to be a different race. It's going to look different. It's going to have different qualities. Some of them might be similar to each other. They might be the same types, but like, you know, you're never going to have like, you might have two different lizard man races, but they're going to be very different from each other. They're not going to be the same, you know? So it's a really good system just for that. If you like, you know, having something to help you out to generate weird monster races, right? or anything like that, you know? So do check that out. All right. Anybody have any more questions for me? Because I think I'm out of topics at this point, aside from the ones I was going to ask John. But like I said, those are John dependent. So I appreciate everybody who stayed on for the live stream. I really appreciate all the super chats. And so will Domino, who's currently looking up at me from the floor like she's considering whether she should pounce on me or not. Are you going to bounce on me? Are you coming up? She's got the funniest look at her face. I think she doesn't know what she's going to do yet. She's assessing her odds, I think. So anyways, thank you for that. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for staying on. Check out the list of products that I have if you're especially if you're new. I mean, if John sent you over here, or check out my other videos, you know, and I've got them set up in convenient playlists. One of them is rants, where I mostly am talking about how horrible wizards or other parts of the woke mob are. Another one is You Were Taught D&D Wrong on Purpose, which is a collection of mostly DMing advice that a lot of modern gamers don't ever get. Then we have reviews, which are reviews of books that are, I get sent tons of books to review, and I've got a whole list of them there. And then live streams and the RPG Pundit encounter. And just so you guys know, the next RPG Pundit encounter, $9.99 from Frank Destroso for Domino. Thank you very much, Frank. I really appreciate it. And so does Domino, who has decided she's decided not to take the risk, and she's just flopped down at my feet now, resting. But I'm sure Domino will thank you later on when she finds out. What was I saying? Oh yeah, well, check out those my different playlists, and I'm sure you're gonna find a lot in common. And if you were sent here by Jon Del Arroz, there's a lot in common in my style and his, of how we talk about the state of the industry. Of course, he talks about sci-fi and TV shows and stuff like that, and I'm pretty much RPGs, but you will probably enjoy it. Oh, that's sad, man. A porch pirate took Crimson Dragon Slayer for me. Well, it could have been worse. It could have taken Baptism of Fire. I have Star Adventure coming, and Gonzo, and The Last Sun. Excellent. That's a great combination, by the way. All three of those, they can work together. Because, like, if you want, for example, to do a sci-fi setting that is Gonzo, you can combine the Gonzo Fantasy Companion and Star Adventure, and it'll be like sci-fi, right? Got Sarmatians about a month out. Oh, thank you so much, Tater. I really appreciate that. I love hearing about people that have picked up my books. I especially love people that are talking about how they're using my books and, you know, running, what type of games they're running and all that sort of thing. So that's wonderful. And okay, sorry, I was going to say that the next episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter, which will not be Jon Del Arroz because we've already got the guest booked for next one. Maybe Jon Del Arroz will be the one after that, we hope. The next episode is going to be on the 4th of May, okay? So it's every 4 weeks, basically. Thank you for going live despite JD and Kansas. Yeah, well, I was, I'd had a complicated day, and I was like this close to saying, well, fuck it, whatever. Right? I'm not doing it. And then at the last, I said, no, hang on, like there are people going to show up. I don't know how many. As it turns out, it was a lot, right? Like, I mean, we've got 70 people watching, right? So that's great. That's the same basically as I get for the encounter. But I mean, I love doing the encounter show, and I was really hyped about. I've got lots of interesting things to talk about with Jon, and unfortunately, that's going to have to wait now. But I appreciate all you guys coming on to watch, and I think we've had a very interesting live stream, and it's gone for an hour and a half, which is like, I think Jon had said that was his limit. So you're actually getting more time here than you probably would have gotten with him here. No one of consequence. Predomino Arquette has been very sick. Hope she'll come home from the vet tomorrow. Oh, well, I wish you good luck with that. No one of consequence. Because, as you know, before I had Domino, I had Meatball, and I loved that cat. And she got sick very suddenly. She was super healthy for most of her life, and then she just suddenly had kind of a health collapse and died within a week, which is better, I guess, than being sick for a really long time. And, we're keeping a close eye on Domino anyway, and she's a kitten. Right now there is no sign of ailment to her. She has two modes though. Like, one is like zooming like a maniac everywhere, and the other one is she's completely asleep, right? Like totally tuckered out. And those are basically just the only two things she does besides eating. But yeah, I wish you luck with your cat for sure. All right, so I guess we're done for today. I really appreciate this, guys. Check it out. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and then share the live stream once it's processed. If you feel like it, I think it's got a lot of interesting conversations, and I love having conversations with my audience, as you can see, and it's just lovely. So I'm doing the RPG Pundit experience now, and I do this because I think a lot of people really enjoy it. But I do also like those occasions where I can be doing a live stream alone with you guys and interacting with you, as opposed to some special guest. So that's cool too. And I guess that's everything for today. Currently smoking, still finishing up. It's a big pipe. The Ben Wade Rhodesian and Argento Latakia. And we will see you all soon.